It's a meaningful challenge not to be able to find enough seats to fill the legacy and the goodness that comes from Nisan, and to be overflowing with expression and love and kindness and the tears of children. And there is grief and sadness in this sanctuary today. There's hurt, but there's also love and friendship, and there's strength. And our hearts are joined together in grief this morning. Our hearts are joined together with all the hearts that Nisan touched, with the hearts of our Congregation Shalom family, with the hearts of the Temple Beth Shalom family. Our hearts are joined together with Nissan's colleagues at the cooperative educational service agencies and the many young people and adults who had their lives changed for the better for Nissan's gift of bringing the best of each person forward, where he guided and stewarded young lives in needs of help. Our hearts are joined with the friends that Candy and Nissan cultivated in their lives who stand together in this moment of sadness, and the friends of dear children who respected and loved this wonderful father in our community. And some of us may be strangers to each other, but in this sanctuary we are one, united in sadness. But most of all, our hearts are joined with that which was most precious and dear in Nissan's life, his dear family, children and grandchildren who were his highest source of pride. Nissan was a doer who tended to the needs of his family. Sometimes there are physical manifestations of the love that we hold for those most precious to us. And Nissan's garden is one such manifestation. But just as he planted and just as he sowed the vegetables and the sweet tomatoes in his garden, he brought forward the first and best fruits of his life, his children and his children's children, who sat at his and the love of his life, Candy's, feet. The name Nisan refers to the Hebrew month, the first month of spring, and its etymology is that it speaks of the first fruits brought each year as an offering to the divine. Today we return Nisan to the earth, but we also take deep note of the goodness that emerges from his life, the offerings that he brought to all things, the goodness of his family, the goodness of his worthy deeds, and recognize in this hour of sadness that all of our hearts will continue to be blessed by the life that he lived. And so we turn to the 121st Psalm, a psalm that bids us to look up to the mountains. For Nisan was a source of uplift to his family and to his friends, and his goodness will be a permanent marker in their lives, not unlike the lofty peaks of the highest heights.
Esa enai el heharim me'ayin yavo Ezri me'im Adonai Oseh shamayim va'aretz.
I lift up my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help will come from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth.
Al yitein lamot raglecha, al yanum shomerecha.
God will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber.
Hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael, Adonai shomerecha, Adonai tzilcha, al yad yeminecha.
Behold, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. The Eternal is your keeper. Adonai is your shade at your right hand.
Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka ve'yareach balayla. Adonai yishmorcha mikol ra, yishmor et nafshecha, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzetecha uvoecha. Me'ata עד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם.
The sun shall not harm you by day, nor the moon at night. Adonai will guard you from all harm. God will guard your soul, your going and coming, now and forever. Mourning is the price we pay for having the courage to love others. And even in grief, we know that the wonder of human life is too complex and too magnificent to be memorialized in endless pain. And the gifts of spirit our loved ones gave us cannot be measured or weighed, nor can they be lost or even tarnished by time. Even in our darkest hours, we know that some of Nisan's light and his warmth will always be with us, bringing comfort and courage, and in the fullness of time, healing and peace. Death has summoned our beloved Nisan Bar-Lev, and for his love which united us in life and which death cannot sever, and for his companionship which we shared along life's path and which still continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of his heart and mind which brought us joy and happiness and now have become a precious heritage of the Spirit. For all these and more, we are thankful. In this time of mourning, we listen to the voice of our sacred scripture that brings us the ever-new message of God's nearness, the 23rd Psalm.
Adonai roi lo echsar binot sheyarbitseni al mei menuchot yinaleini nafshi yishovev yancheini b'maglei tzedek yancheini b'maglei tzedek למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות, לא אירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפניי שולחן נגד צורריי, דשנת ושמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. חסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, כל ימי חיי. שבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. Adonai roi lo echsal. Adonai roi lo echsal.
Please read with me the words of the 23rd Psalm. Eternal One, you are my shepherd, I shall not want. You make me lie down in green pastures. You lead me beside still waters. You restore my soul. You guide me in paths of righteousness for your name's sake. Even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. With rod and staff you comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup is overflowing. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in your house forever. There's a beautiful story from our tradition that speaks of a conference among the trees and the decision of the trees to select a ruler who would best lead. And they sent a delegation to a shade tree which bore no fruit, and the delegation inquired, "Why do you make so much noise when the wind blows?" And the tree replied, "The only way that I will be known is by making a lot of noise." They then turned to a fruit-bearing tree and asked it, "Tell us, why are you so quiet? Why do you not let yourself be known? Even when the wind blows through your branches, you're silent." And the fruit-bearing tree replied, "I do not need to make a lot of noise to call attention to myself. My fruit testify for me." Nisan was wonderfully quirky and fun, and above all kind, and his actions spoke for him. And it's meaningful to hear the words of those most precious to him, the fruit of his life and his existence, his loving family and friends. And so it's an honor to call upon dear children who will speak in this order, to call upon Josh, and then Rabbi Benji, and Ari, and Abby, and then grandchildren Sammy and Ruby, and colleague Barb Van Haren, and Rabbi Shapiro.
I just wanted to start and ask you to forgive me for the narrow kind of scope of my speech. I thought it was, kind of clever and fun. In the last couple of days, I was trying to remember him. And as I'm sitting here thinking about kind of the scope of his life, his childhood and his time in the army and his coming to this country by himself and building this life like this kind of tree branching out, it feels incomplete. My father was a true Renaissance man. His wide range of accomplishments, the tireless work he did for the children of Wisconsin, his beautiful vegetable garden, the extraordinary innovations he was always coming up with, his family. This will doubtlessly be covered by other people here today. Instead, I thought I'd share a little secret about my dad. It's true that he grew up in Israel, and yes, he loved living in Milwaukee and visiting his schools throughout Wisconsin. But in his heart of hearts, I discovered over the years that my dad was really a New Yorker. I moved to New York a little more than 20 years ago, and every time my dad visited, he was game for anything. He had a wandering, adventuresome spirit. The man was always on the go. By the time I would roll out of bed and text him, he'd already gotten coffee at Starbucks on 85th and 1st, breakfast at Tall Bagels on 86th and 2nd, and he'd walk by the East River at Carl Schurz Park. My dad loved any chance he could get to take his grandkids out. He'd bring Isabel and Ruby to our local diner, blowing their minds with extra sides of curly fries and slabs of chocolate cake. He loved to meander. For the first few visits, it was all about Times Square. Manna for him, a nightmare for everyone else. He was delighted by the city, buying up fake Rolexes in Battery Park City to give as gifts, taking selfies in the narrow avenues surrounding Wall Street, even winding his way through Louis Vuitton with a personal shopper. He loved seeing Broadway shows. I felt such a jolt of pride every time I came home to Milwaukee to see the playbill from the latest show we'd seen framed in the basement. I remember recently walking with him through Times Square and warning him about the guys who hand you a CD before demanding money for it. When one hustler tried, my dad just laughed and said, "Not a chance." And did we eat? Barbecue at Fetasaw in Brooklyn, Wagyu beef ramen in Meijin, Peking duck in Chinatown, steaks at Sammy's famous Romanian. During what would turn out to be his last visit, to celebrate Ruby's graduation in June, he'd moved on to visiting various museums. He enjoyed MoMA one day and Cooper Hewitt the next. When I texted him after work to see where he was, he sent me a picture from the gardens in Central Park. On his last full night in the city, we started the evening by going out for tacos at our favorite neighborhood restaurant, sitting al fresco as delivery boys zipped down First Avenue dangerously close to us. We went to see Bob Dylan's Girl from the North Country on Broadway, a beautiful show about the brief special time we have on earth. Afterward, we went out for a second dinner, finishing the night with barbecue brisket and smoked chicken at Virgil's. My dad often described himself as an immigrant. He retained that childlike delight in all this country offered him. The opportunities, the technology, all the various meats to consume. It wasn't until he was gone that I made that connection between us. My love of walking the streets, of going from neighborhood to neighborhood, of being open to what the world puts in front of us, that is all him. I miss you, Dad.
There's an old story that the people of Rome spoke of Michelangelo as a man with 4 souls because he excelled in architecture and sculpture and painting and poetry. His skill had produced many of the city's most beautiful buildings and statues. When Michelangelo was on his deathbed, a group of friends were gathered by his bedside. One grievingly said, "Michelangelo, how will Rome get along without you?" With a weak wave of his hand towards the open window and the city beyond, filled with creations of his genius, Michelangelo answered, "Rome will never be without me, and we will never be without my dad. The creations of his genius and of his heart will be with us always." Anyone who knows Nissan Bar-Lev knows that, as Rabbi Noah told us, he showed his love for us through his actions. Of course, he told us all that he loved us, but thoughtfully and completely he demonstrated his love every day of his life through his deeds. Early in our childhood, our dad began building a giant model railroad called Joshville, which took up a large chunk of our unfinished basement at the time. Unlike some dads who would maybe slap some tracks on the table and call it a day, our dad basically lived at the model railroad store on the weekends. We would go and pick out train cars. We would build models. Our town had a KFC and a Burger King, tucked along with its mountains and working streetlights and multiple tracks. Our dad got one of those old desks from an elementary school, the kind where the top flips open, and he ran all the wiring and switches through that. Whenever we would have friends come over, Josh and I specifically would love to impress our friends by lifting up the cover to that desk and showing them the hundreds of wires running within. A train set that was so meaningful to us, still brings back warm memories. Just this morning, Jake and I found the trains, and we're playing with them. A little later, as we started growing up, we needed more room in our house, so my dad decided to remodel a room in our basement to make it a bedroom for Josh, so that Ari and I wouldn't have to share a room. But again, he showed his love through his actions. He wanted this room to be perfect. Without the benefit of YouTube, he took down paneling, installed a raised floor so it would be a little warmer in the winter, learned to install drywall, even on the ceiling, first by balancing it on his head, and then later on he figured out how to get a mechanical lift in there. He installed light fixtures, built a closet, hung sliding doors. It was an amazing feat. And I got to be his trusty assistant. He let me even use a nail gun, which is probably not a great decision. Helping my dad build that bedroom in the basement was one of my favorite childhood experiences, and I even got my own hammer and tape measure from him that I still have. And of course, as so many of us know, in the past few years, our dad's vegetable garden has truly been a labor of love for my mom and for our family. Though my dad did some vegetable gardening earlier in the 1980s, until recently he was in more of a supporting role as my mom and grandma did the flower and vegetable gardening. But when my mom suggested recently that they put some raised beds in their backyard, she had no idea what it would become, I don't think. Not only did he build a giant system of tall raised beds himself, how many 75-year-olds can design and construct these giant wooden garden beds? If you're at the house later, you can see them. And he would build them in the garage and drag them into the backyard. But he also developed his own irrigation system that is a work of genius. It was after everything was built and planted, though, that my dad's love really showed through. He tended to each of those vegetable gardens every day of the spring and summer, pulling weeds and checking the pH levels of the soil, experimenting with tenting to get more growing over time. And in the off-season, he would spend time researching different types of plants and seeds. Because I have a vegetable garden too, we would often text each other pictures of our gardens, sometimes with no explanation. Scrolling back through my texts with my dad, most of the pictures are of our gardens, or of our car dashboards comparing our miles per gallon fuel economy. He was very excited when his Lexus hit 46 miles per gallon. We also texted each other when one of us had a particularly fast internet connection. When we were in the hospital and Lauren was in labor with Jake, I texted him a picture that I think he expected to be a baby picture, but instead it was of the 150 Mbps internet connection in the hospital room, which was blazing fast for the time. I know that we are all going to miss those little interactions and the big ones. Our dad was always there for us in any capacity, at any time. He was endlessly generous, exceedingly kind. He was a great grandpa and papa to our kids who adored him so much, and he was just the best dad. He taught us every day of our lives that if you really love someone, you show that love through your actions. This is how a man lives for many years after he has physically left this earth. He lives through his deeds, through the good he did while he was here, and through an impact that will always remain. There's a blessing in Jewish tradition that says, Baruch atah Adonai, hanotea betochenu hayeh olam. We praise you, Adonai, our God, who has implanted within each of us everlasting life. We will never be without you, Dad, and we love you so much.
My father was a complicated man, and like all complicated men, his motivations were simple. He sought connection, he sought creation, and he was forever seeking ways to communicate a vision. It was a vision of love and inclusion, and he showed it in many ways. He exercised it with his work, and he practiced it in his patience with us. I can think of countless examples of his patience. As a young child, I used to beg him to dig for dinosaur bones in our backyard, and so one night, he buried chicken bones from dinner for us to uncover later. As a second grader, I became fascinated with turtles. He encouraged my instincts, driving me to the city limits to get 2 of them for pets, teaching me how to clean their aquarium. He helped me clean their aquarium. There'd be like 6 or 8 inches of water in the tank, and it would get really dirty. And he would take this like tube and a bucket, and he would siphon the water from the tank. He'd put like one end down, and then he'd put the other in his mouth, and he would like suck in the dirty water right to a point and hold it with his thumb, and then it would just siphon into the bucket. And I thought to myself, this guy knows how to do everything. His patience had no bounds. As I became an adolescent, he tolerated many years of clanky electric guitar without a peep of disapproval. My father was a complicated man, but his wisdom was simple, and his religion was generosity. And not just the generosity of letting me beat him in an arm wrestle, or the generosity of $20 for a trip to Taco Bell, which in 1999 was too much money. He gave, and he gave, and he gave some more. And he was wise. He always seemed to be speaking to the arc of our lives. He encouraged me and never judged. I switched careers and he supported it. He saw me for my motivations. He saw my vulnerabilities and called me buddy. I don't know how to measure my dad in a few paragraphs, and it seems futile to try. He died and I wasn't ready for it. I keep feeling the shock waves, the enormous presence of his absence. I wasn't ready for him to disappear and never will be. But I also know that I'm endlessly lucky, and I know that when I feel a pang of anguish, all I have to do is remind myself that he's a part of me. Literally 50% of my DNA. His body may be in the process of transforming into the life stuff for critters now, but lest I think that all he is a collection of memories, I like to remember that he's a part of my thoughts and my instincts and my experiences. Literally again, he's there in my skin, in the make of my bones, a major stakeholder in my existence. And when I miss him, I can look in the mirror and see that he's still there. L'dor v'dor, from generation to generation, you are a part of me, Dad, and you live on with all of us.
What can I tell you about my dad that you don't already know? Although, to be fair, some of this is going to be overlap. So, early childhood memories of my parents working together in the yard. Not together doing the same task, but in concert. My dad landscaping and building the flower beds for my mom to plant. My mom cooking dinner and my dad all but forcing her onto the couch so he could clean the dishes. A teamwork that persisted and only grew in harmony through my parents' almost 47 years together. My mom missing her own mother's vegetable gardens, so my dad throwing himself joyfully into the task of building raised beds, as Benji said, high enough so they didn't have to bend over to pick, and a new one added almost each year. Earlier this summer, when I was helping my mom plant flowers, my dad was tilling the soil near a bare patch of land, cutting sod and packing it in himself, carefully making sure that the grass was even. In fact, since his death, one of the most beautiful and painful places to be is our backyard. Excuse me. It's an homage to the love and pride he had in my mom. She wanted to illuminate the gardens, so he purchased 1 million of the brightest solar lights he could find and staked them proudly all around each garden. He hung sun-shaped decorations that they bought together in Hawaii to accent the flower beds and the vegetable gardens. Being in the yard, the lights around the flowers, the decor, the vegetables whose vines continue to reach towards the sky, they tell the story of how much my dad loved my mom. Since his passing, my mind has been a series of flash images of my dad. My dad, only child that he was from an old European home, not quite sure what to do with a firecracker daughter after 3 sons, would make the time for just us to go to cafes together. He tried to teach me chess. I'm not sure either of us really knew how to play. He took me to bookstores, to the museum, to the IMAX theater. My dad, son of a textile factory owner and seamstress, a still image in my mind of him sitting at the kitchen table, gently holding my favorite orange coat, glasses down at his nose, delicately sewing a button back on for me that had fallen off. Jumping off of my dad's bent knee in the family park pool where we spent so many of our summers. The way the sun burnt stripes on his back after a long afternoon in the lounge chair watching his children play in the water. The money container swinging around his neck as we'd all ride the Cowabunga water slide together at Noah's Ark. My dad cooking hot dogs and frozen vegetables for us when my mom was out of town a few weeks in the winter. My dad with the video camera documenting so many special and mundane moments of our childhood to send regularly to his family in Israel. My dad petting our cat Mazik so lovingly. My dad holding my hand close to his heart on my wedding day. My dad, just last week, repainting the basketball hoop because he thought his grandchildren would like to see it looking like new. Who repaints a basketball hoop? It was looking great. I used to think my dad was a quirky man, and of course that is still true. But suddenly, after his death, it occurred to me it's not just that he was quirky. It was that he was deeply passionate about everything he did. My dad never had an idle moment, and yet there was nothing that he did that he didn't love. He loved his work and found tremendous fulfillment from it every day for more than 40 years. He loved advocating for the people he cared about. If you ever need to make a phone call to customer service that you don't want to make, Dad's got you. He loved his clothes and his jewelry and his baths. He loved his Nespresso machine in the basement office. My mom often says it was the best gift she ever bought him. He loved his grill and his smoker, always tinkering with apps and such to get the temperature just right, proudly showing to Josh, oh no, look at this. He loved new technology. He loved organizing and making sure every item had a place, even buying large plastic sheets to wrap up just like a standard 6-foot folding table so that it looked like a present. And he set it on blocks in the garage so it wouldn't touch the ground. He loved experimenting with his vegetable gardens. The tents he set up to get produce a month early this year, he actually got to taste some of his vegetables this year. The drip irrigation system that he built so that water would drip carefully over each seed and sprout in each of the beds. He loved his exercise routine and staying in shape. He was vibrant, vital. He was so very alive. He loved getting on the floor with his grandkids, building with Legos. He and Isaac built with Legos once, and when Isaac was 3, and Isaac built like a big tower, and like wasn't a big deal, but Isaac was proud of it. Dad took a picture of it, and like in full dad style, he printed it out on an 8 by 10 and framed it. It gave it to me like, I thought you'd like to have this. So it's in his room. It's been in his, it's nice. He loved making pictures with them, reading books, cuddling for a show, and finding animal videos on his phone. He loved us all being together more than anything, looking down a long table at the faces of his children, our significant others, and his grandchildren, watching the garden he and my mom planted continue to bloom and spread. But what I want to share with you most of all is the enduring lesson I learned from my dad. He and my mom have always made supporting us their top priority. Who knows if they ever actually disagreed with the decision we made as adults, because if so, they never told us. To us, it was always, that's wonderful, you've done a lot of research. We trust you, you know what's best for yourself, you know what's best for your family. We support it, whatever it is you want to do. We want to support you in this. My dad inherently made me feel trusted. He made me feel safe. He made me feel supported and respected. He told me all the time he was proud of me. He loved my husband unconditionally and without hesitation, making him feel like a son from day one. He gave without being asked. He gave without strings attached. He gave because he loved us. As a result, I wake up every day knowing that without taking a step out of bed, my parents are proud of me. Their unquestioning pride and unconditional love means that I was always free to be exactly who I wanted, to pursue the path that felt truest to me. It is this landscape of generosity, dedication, dependability, love, support, and trust that I hope to pass on to my children. Although he is incomprehensibly gone from this earth, he will live on in our hearts, in our children's faces, in the way we treat each other, in the seeds we plant and watch as they grow and open to the sun.
When I was at camp this year, Grandpa sent me a letter as parsley. He said that there is a lot of parsley in the garden for me. He doesn't even like parsley. He planted it off of me.
The 3 things Grandpa loves most: work, espresso, and his family. Every morning when I got up at Grandma and Grandpa's house, he would come and hug me right away. Even if he had a meeting, he would always put me first. I loved picking him things from his amazing and delicious garden at home. The big cucumbers and the bright red raspberries he would give me would taste so good. At the state fair, he would always eat this huge turkey leg, foot-long corn dogs, cream puffs, and more. He would always amaze me with how much he could eat. I got inspired with him to have a giant turkey like myself, and it was incredible, just like him. Grandpa would always play with us at any time. He was caring and be willing to do anything if it would make one of us feel better. If we broke a toy even a little bit, he would come to the rescue. He loved taking us to the hardware store and letting us get a lollipop and popcorn while he shopped. I love him so much, and our family would never be complete without him.
Highlighting Nissan's long and far-reaching career is a daunting task, and I know I won't do it justice. I do not remember a day in my career without Nissan's presence or leadership in the field of special ed. He dedicated his life to help the kids who needed it the most, their families, and all the educators who served them. He began his career as a speech and language pathologist and worked at CESA 7 for 44 years as the director of special education. This alone for any of the rest of us would have been enough of a job. But this was just Nissan's day job. And as I thought, in his spare time, he was spending time collaborating and partnering with many stakeholders to benefit the kids of Wisconsin. After listening to the family stories today, I don't know when he had spare time. He worked collaboratively with the Department of Public Instruction, our advocacy organizations, our parent groups, and our professional organizations. He provided numerous publications and presentations and influenced special ed as we know it today at the local and at the state and the national levels. He was very committed to making a difference and was never fearful to tackle the issues facing special education. He had a vision to bring parents of children with disabilities and educators together and be able to work in a collaborative partnership. He was the co-creator of the nationally recognized Wisconsin Special Education Mediation System, a non-adversarial way for schools and family to find common ground when discussing the needs of children. He co-authored the Special Education in Plain Language document. It's used widely across Wisconsin and beyond to help parents and others successfully navigate the special education system. He brought a heightened awareness of the importance of family engagement, calling on families to be in school districts to work with families as part of the IEP process, making Wisconsin the first and the only state to do so. Nissan chaired the State Superintendent's Council for the Blind and Visually Impaired. He served on the Governor's Council on Autism. He's the past president of the Autism Society of Wisconsin and many, many other councils in our state. He's been a lifelong advocate at not only the educational level, but legislatively as well, bringing about positive changes in programming for our students with autism and ensuring schools were proactive in their approach to students with challenging behaviors. Nissan is one of only few recipients in the history of Wisconsin to receive the Friend of Special Education from the state superintendent. Nissan also served on the Wisconsin Council for Administrators of Special Services Board of Directors as the Special Projects Co-Chair, and he took on any topic in front of him. During this time, he addressed staffing challenges for speech and language. He brought universal design for learning to the forefront. Most recently, he's been working on ensuring that students with disabilities have the necessary tools so they can become successful readers and being able to access educational materials, and has been an author again of a federally recognized guidebook on supporting our students with print disability. A week ago today, Nissan and I had breakfast together at the Friendship Cafe, which is a nearby employer of individuals with varying abilities. We spent our time catching up, comparing our vegetable gardens. Mine does not compare. I have no irrigation system. And then he shared, and we talked extensively about his latest project on text-to-speech. And he was very anxious to get this project done, and I can assure you that we will make sure that happens. This is just a snapshot of the incredible legacy that Nissan is leaving behind. And while he'll be remembered for his accomplishments, he's going to be remembered because of the type of person that he was. Over the last few days, there has been an outpouring of reactions and memories from the special education field, and I want to share some that I have heard and read. People remember Nissan as a fashion icon. Impeccably dressed, down to the gold cufflinks with his initials, and only Nissan could get away with sporting a turtleneck and a velvet jacket. Nissan was our technology guru. He was the first one among us to have a cell phone. It was about this big, but he was very, very proud of it. He was also the first hybrid car that I think I ever rode in. And he converted many of us, including me, to becoming an Apple iPhone user. And he would always look at me and say, "Barb, there's an app for that." Other descriptions included, Nissan was a man of style and grace. He was gentle and kind. He was an individual with integrity. He was a passionate and hard worker. He was a lifelong learner, an agent for change, a tireless and steadfast leader, a fierce advocate for our kids, and an esteemed colleague. Nissan was often known as the father of special education. And for many of us here today, Nissan was our friend. In Wisconsin, every time a special educator or a therapist writes a plan for a student with a disability, they are influenced by Nissan. Every time a special ed administrator carries out their policies and procedures, they're influenced by Nissan. Every time a family member navigates the special education system for the first time, they're influenced by Nissan. And every time a child with a disability becomes a successful reader or graduates from high school, they are influenced by Nissan. Candy and Benji and Ari and Josh and Abby and all the family members, I know he was so proud of all of you. And you must also be so proud of him and his legacy. I believe Governor Evers said it best. Nissan was a hero to all the children of Wisconsin. Thank you.
Nissan Bar-Lev was an extraordinary person that we've already heard. We always knew he was a mensch of the highest order, A mensch is a person who's not only kind, but a mensch is a person who is willing to do all that he can possibly do to make the world a better place in which to live. And his name Bar-Lev, a name that reflects the son of a good-hearted person. Lev. Each of you who spoke today spoke with a sense of heart and love that emanates from the heart. It was so appropriate and so meaningful because he lived his life in that manner. In a sense, he was a Romanian, he was an Israeli, he was an American. He was a Romanian in a Yiddish form, because Yiddish declares that a human being is particularly meaningful in life if they have a gute neshama, or if you're a Litvak, a gite neshama. A gute neshama is what he was able to derive perhaps from that Romanian origins of his family. It's quite meaningful to know that a person with a gute neshama, which means a good soul, is enwrapped, that heart is enwrapped in a refined cloth. And I think that Nisan was a person who actually lived his life in accordance with having a fine cloth wrapped around his heart, which made him a source of warmth and made his children and family and grandchildren and all who loved him feel embraced as if they were embraced by someone who wants to warm, wants to help, wants to be able to do what he can. He was an Israeli in the staunch manner by which he lived his life and acted in a way to make things get done in the right way. When the Israelis realized that they were living in a desert community, in an environment, and they couldn't spray water all over the desert because that water, which was so precious, would be lost. The Israelis, in terms of irrigation and the protectiveness of the soil in which we use, utilized a drip irrigation method, which Nisan believed was so important as well. Did he develop that from his growth in Israel and how he had created those beautiful vegetables to allow those sources of life to sprout so that people could be sustained and that the water not be wasted. And he was an American. And for all of his brilliance, he had this extraordinarily Bar-Lev, wonderful heart for what we can each do to create a world, a society that would redound to the benefit of all in the community. Because he had that open and wonderful heart. He was an extraordinary man. I'll close soon because I know it's getting late, but there is a number of other articles that I think is important to remember him by that he leaves behind a legacy not only of beautiful family and his love of family. And Candy, you were such a wonderful couple together. You escorted each other through life as if in a beautiful dance. There was a love and an elegance that was not only enabling you to enwrap around each other, but your beautiful children and grandchildren. And what that meant about finding nourishment. He, of course, lived his life in a manner which was formidably a teacher. I love this reading because I think it could have been written by him. It's a reading to children and a reading to all children, not only his, but all. It's entitled, "To You, My Child." This is a poem written by a teacher of children. If there could only be one thing in life for me to teach you, my child, I would teach you to love, to respect others, so that you'll always be able to find respect in yourself. To learn the value of giving so that when a time comes when someone is in need, you'll have accustomed yourself to giving because he lived his life as a giving person. To act in a manner with which you would wish to be treated. To laugh, to smile, to enjoy life as much as you can so that you can bring joy back into this world. To have faith in others. To be understanding. To stand tall in this world and learn how to depend upon yourself. To only take from this earth that which you really need, so that there will be enough for others. And to not depend on money or material things for your happiness, but rather to learn to appreciate the people who love you. The simple purities of life that comes from goodness. To find peace and security within yourself. To you, my children, my grandchildren, my students, I hope that I have taught you these things, for these things are love. I couldn't imagine a better poem that reflects the life of Nisan Buyum Bar-Lev than anything else. He was a Gita Neshama, a good soul, a man with a fine mind. And from the moment I met him, I realized that this was a person who had a Bar-Lev, such a heart, such a love for family, such a love for humanity, such a will to make the world a better place in which to be. We were fortunate that we have known and had been loved and had been respected by a person like him. And my last statement reflects his sense of respect, because he always offered respect. Respect to the student, respect to humanity. The word kevod in Hebrew is to respect. The word kavod, which is the same root in Hebrew, means heavy, something that's heavy laden. When you have something to do, it should be substantial. He knew that in his life. And what is substantial is to give respect, the same Hebrew root word, to those people with whom you interact. May this magnificent man, Nisan Bar-Lev, and his dear family always be sustained by his memory. To Candy and Josh, Cameron, and Benji and Lauren, and Abby and James, and Allie, and Ollie, and Isabel, and Ruby, and Sammy, and Jake, and Asher, and Noah, Isaac, and Micah. Did I miss anyone? Because your names will always be with him. We believe that he has entered into life eternal. At the age of 78, a 7 and 8, if you add those two numbers, is 15. If you're an advocate of gematria, a yud and a hey, that's the 10th letter of the alphabet and the 5th letter of the alphabet in Hebrew, is also 15. 78 years old, 15, 7 and 8, and yud and hey, 15, God's name. It could only mean this, that at this moment, which is so hard, he's left us too early, but somehow he is embraced by God. Yud Hey, Yah, Yud Hey Vav Hey. And you can believe that he's watching down upon you, smiling upon you, loving you. He'll watch you over into the future as you grow older and older. And you'll know you'll be with him and he will be with you. And may he rest in peace as we say Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi. And thank you for these beautiful words and reminiscences and memories. Adonai natan v'Adonai lekach yehi shem Adonai mevorach. God has given. God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. Let us take a moment of silence now as we remember Nisan. May the memory of Nisan Bar-Lev endure among us as a blessing. In your own time, O God, when we too are called to enter eternity, may we leave this life secure in the faith that in your light we shall see light. In life and in death we cannot go where you are not, and where you are, hope endures. Sustained by this assurance, we invoke your name, Almighty God. Please rise now for El Malei Rachamim.
El Malei Rachamim Shochein Bamromim Hametzem Nuchan Kona Tachar Kanefeh HaShechina Im Kedoshim Utehorim Kizor HaRakia Mazhirim Et Nishmat Nisan ben Chaim v'Chaya Shehalach le'olamo Ba'al harachamim Yastirehu b'seter knafav le'olamim V'yitzror b'tzror hachayim et nishmato Adonai hu nachalato V'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo V'nomar Amen.
Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Nisan Bar-Lev, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
For Nisan, we'll have an opportunity to recite Kaddish. Here is a prayer recited by mourners, but not one word of death is in the prayer. Rather, it speaks to magnifying life, as he certainly did. And we will say it in his honor, along with other members of his family, Chaim and Chaya Buyum, and Eunice and Donald Kane, and also dear granddaughter Julia Bar-Lev, because they are revered by this family and the sweetness which they all offered, and all of us extend condolences at this moment.
We recite these sacred words together. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabba, v'yalma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kari v'imru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevorach le'olam u'lamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei dekudesha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush bechata v'nechemata. Da'amiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. V'imru Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru Amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved. And let us say, Amen.
Friends, services will continue at Mount Zion Cemetery, we will not be going in a funeral procession. Quick note to those of you coming out to the cemetery, North Avenue is under construction. We have the address printed on a map outside the sanctuary. Best bet would be to go to Watertown Plank and then cut over to 124th and North, or whatever your Google or Waze tells you to do. Following burial, everyone is cordially invited back to the Bar-Lev residence, 8657 North Point Drive here in Fox Point. Family will see friends today until 5, as well as Sunday from 3 to 6 p.m. At this time, we ask that everyone remain standing until the casket has left the sanctuary. At this time, we ask the pallbearers to come forward.
America.